Welcome to We All Serve, the podcast featuring leadership lessons from and conversations with those veterans that have served in the United States Armed Forces. Meet your hosts, Robert Lewis, a proud enlisted veteran that served active duty in the United States Marine Corps. Hoorah! And Shalom Klein, who is privileged to be an officer in the United States Army Reserves. Hoorah! They both agree. We all serve.
There we go. There we go. I love watching your facial reactions, Robert.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be on with you, brother. How are you?
I'm great, brother. It's great to be back. It's it's another beautiful weekend. We're both here in Chicago, and it's just good to see you. It's good to see you, my friend.
It's good to be seen and good to see you as well. A lot is happening around us. There's a lot of news that as we tape this, we are right at the 19th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Just to refresh everyone on that, there were 2,977 that lost their lives on 9/11 at the World Trade Center in New York, the Pentagon in D.C., where our guest is from today, and Somerset County, Pennsylvania. So our thoughts and prayers are with all of the survivors and family members from 9/11. One of the great things about our podcast, Shalom, is we get a chance to talk to some folks who wore the uniform, but now they may not wear the uniform anymore, but they have still found a way to serve in the communities in which they live and work on a day-to-day basis. A fascinating story, man, that I was following just here on September 12th, a New Orleans native, Lawrence Brooks. He turned 111 years old, and he is the oldest known U.S. veteran, World War II veteran, as a matter of fact. And the National World War II Museum, they held a socially distanced celebration to kind of honor him on his birthday. So I thought that was pretty cool, So it's a lot of, look at that, man. That 111 years of service. Over time, I'm sure during his life, he's got some great stories, and kind of like our guest today, might not be 111 years old, but I'm sure our guest has some great stories.
Indeed. And Robert, I could always count on you, brother, for the facts and the information. And it is, it's overwhelming. I think you saw on Friday, on September 11th, I was in uniform at a September 11th ceremony. I've been going every single year, past few years, going in uniform. And it's, I was talking with a fire chief, and he was telling me how, oh my God, next year is going to be 20 years. And I remember exactly where I was. I'm sure you do as well. We'll talk to Victor about it. But just it is crazy. And, I don't want to get into this too much, but, we were talking about how I was actually planning on not being here next year. I was expecting to be downrange and on a deployment, and things moved around, and it's mixed feelings. So that's sort of how my weekend has been. Just got hit with some news. It's good news on most fronts, but certainly it's just literally I was getting ready to pick up my rucksack and head out. So lots of strange feelings, strange emotions, but certainly feelings and emotions of service, which I know we could all relate to. And that's hopefully what every American is feeling this weekend. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Obviously, we are the best. There's no question about that.
Yes, indeed.
And it's, hearing a lot about, remembering where people were on September 11th, but also where people were on September 12th, and the feeling of unity that existed. And that was something I know to many that were in uniform at the time. That was what kept them going. That was what got them, gave the motivation to pick up their ruck, pick up their gear, head out and not knowing how long they'll be gone for, not knowing what they're heading into. But it was that idea that the country's behind them. And that's what this podcast is all about. We all serve. Everybody plays a role in community service and putting on the uniform or supporting those that serve. And there's so much to learn, so much to learn. So I'm excited for our conversation today and just excited for the upcoming weeks. I will say this, Robert, before we get to our guest, as I always do, is if you're viewing this on YouTube, make sure you get on your favorite podcast platform and click subscribe. If you're listening to this, I highly recommend get on YouTube, subscribe here, and you could watch the library of the past over 12 episodes since we've gotten started, and stay alerted to upcoming episodes. Next week, we're going to be joined by my very, very, very dear friend, John Vankowski, a Navy vet. So I guess closer to your end of the spectrum, Robert, a little bit your brother over there in that world. It's good. So I mean, today I am thrilled because I have another brother in the Army joining me. I feel like it's another episode of that. But John Dankowski, who served in the White House, who served in the Navy on a submarine, just fascinating experiences. So he's going to join us next week.
Nice. And don't get too excited, brother. I know that whenever you hear that our guest was in the Army, it kind of perks you up, but you know what it means, right?
You know what?
Together. Ain't ready for Marines yet, man. Come on, we gotta. It's a good start, but you quite ain't there yet.
Okay, well now I feel you're bullying me over here, Robert. So I
have to.
I'm always outnumbered. Get Victor on the screen. Can you please introduce him so I have my Army brother with me?
Absolutely, I will give you some backup, brother. So, listen, guys and gals. I often describe our guest today as being one of the most well-known names in the veterans advocate space here in Chicago. Literally, guys, you cannot go into a room full of veterans and not hear Victor's name. Victor Legroon currently serves as the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Alliances for the Division of Health Equity, Department of Population Sciences at the City of Hope. He also oversees veteran hiring and retention strategies for the diversity and inclusion team at the City of Hope, while working as the advisor of the employee readiness group Veterans for Hope. Victor recently has been selected as a 2020 Fellow for Leadership LA. Prior to coming to City of Hope, Victor, where I met him in Chicago here, worked for Mayor Rahm Emanuel as the director of the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs. Prior to working for the city of Chicago, Victor worked at the University of Illinois at Chicago for the Office of the Chancellor of Health Affairs, where he was responsible for external partnerships as well as community and legislative relations. Before his time at UIC, Victor coordinated cancer disparity strategies for the Comprehensive Cancer Center at the University of Chicago. Victor credits his diverse experience and impact to his time spent with the 10th Mountain Division of the U.S. Army. Yeah, absolutely. You see, he's excited about that. Where he was an intelligence analyst until he was medically retired in 2006. He currently speaks nationally about veterans-related topics, including transition and employment strategies. Victor enjoys mentoring and serving as an external advisor to partners including the Obama administration and the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. In his personal time, he has roles on the boards of 100 Black Men of LA and the Foothill Workforce Development Board. Without further ado, the man who has left Chicago, but his name is still here. Ladies and gentlemen, we humbly give you Victor Legroon.
There we go. Victor, such a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure.
Thanks. Listen, thanks for the invite, first of all. Secondly, I gotta shorten that bio. It's
there's nothing you can take off of that, Victor. Nothing.
Yeah, you did all that, man.
It sounds like an obituary a little bit, so I want to make sure.
I have some good friends that are up at Fort Drum right now, and they're keeping things safe. All MPs. So Fort Drum and your training was your military intel experience or training, was that at Fort Huachuca?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 35 series. Got a lot of good buddies down there.
That's it, man. Yeah, it's a long, hot summer. It's about, I think we spent 30 weeks training in Huachuca, and it was, it was a great experience on the things that you don't want to do again. So got to scoot down to Yuma, see the Marines a little bit.
Oh,
yeah, don't get too excited. It's not, put it down there, brother. Nothing but heat. So it's been a great experience, man. It's been a great ride, and I appreciate you guys inviting me to come out. Really do.
No, thank you for coming on. And come on, man. You cannot have a podcast of this caliber and not have a Victor Lagroon on. So I think you grew up in DC, right, Victor?
Yes.
Yeah. So what was it like? What was young Victor like? Let's start there.
So it depends on who you ask, right?
Okay.
It was interesting because having a dad who's a Vietnam era vet, my oldest brother went in the Army back in 79. My cousin who's closest to me was a Gulf War vet. My youngest brother was in the Army in the 90s. My grandfather in World War II. DC is that kind of place, right? There's a lot of history in the city, but there's also a lot of history of service. And, so many families are just like mine. When the nation called, you answered, and you worried about the rest later. And for me as a kid, the first time I went to Arlington Cemetery was when my brother's best friend was buried there, right? So I knew early what the cost of service looked like. I also understood, going to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, going to the changing of guard ceremony at a very young age, going to the Lincoln Memorial and the reflective pool and so on. It gave me a sense of ownership. And I remember this back even as a Boy Scout, right? And I was a Boy Scout in the old days where you learned how to shoot at the Boy Scouts. You went to your jamboree in the summertime and, you sitting laying out there in the prone shooting a little 22 rifle. And it taught you a sense of accountability for one another, a sense of team camaraderie. And I always say that the Boy Scouts best prepared me for the culture of the military and that sense of responsibility, that sense of accountability, what it meant to leave nobody behind, and no matter what the activity was and which people's skills were. So, my mom did everything she could to keep me busy. I was, in karate, and I was in the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and so forth. Played a little football, moved to Western New York in high school, actually. So I finished high school up by Buffalo in a city called Rochester, New York, where I ended up putting down some good roots and doing some good work out there as well. And worked there until 9/11. And 9/11 changed everything for all of us. And here we are on the 19th anniversary. I couldn't imagine us still fighting this fight, right? 19 years ago. If someone would have said to you, hey, this is going to be the longest war in American history, we thought we were going to pretty much go in, do what we needed to do, and get out and be back by dinner time, right? As the saying goes. And I think for many of us, we recognized at some point in that tenure that this was a long haul, a long-term commitment from our country. The cost continues to be steep, and we continue to have a need for a broader national discussion around how we support the global war on terrorism and those who served and fought and paid the cost, how we recognize those sacrifices, just as we have for Korean War vets and Vietnam vets and so on. I'm really interested in seeing how we can support the Global War on Terrorism Foundation to ensure that we have that place where our family members and our friends and our children at some point can go to and say, this is emblematic of my mom's sacrifice, my dad's sacrifice, my brother and my sister or my parent. And, I think our nation kind of needs that amongst other things right now. So, for me, growing up in an environment that I kind of saw service as when it's your turn to do it, you just go and do it, right? And, that's kind of what I've always loved about Chicago in a very unique way. Chicago's another one of those cities that has deep entrenched roots around service, right? From Navy Pier to Soldier Field, you can see the emblematic structure of what the history of that city's service has been like, right? Going back to World War I, when you can see the doughboys, and you can see that in Bronzeville, the people who greet you when you come into that area are World War I veterans, right? And to see that, a group of African American men fought for the opportunity to go abroad and fight again, and to ensure that our partners and allies had a taste of freedom that they may not have even experienced coming home, but it was that important as Americans, right? To not leave your ally behind, to not leave them in need. And I'm hopeful that veterans like you guys can kind of push our country back into that direction where we're seen as allies again. We're seen as a resource, a voice of respect, and someone who others can rely on, because we need that nationally again, right? These are still tumultuous times, and I'm old, so I'm not going to put the uniform back on again. But quite frankly, I know guys who kids are soon going to be able to serve, who are serving still. And that's unfortunate in one sense, but it's also amazing as a country that we can see that generational commitment to service, because I think we all can agree and acknowledge not everything is for everybody, but there's always some type of service you can commit to your country, to your community, to your city. So it's been a great experience for me. And veterans advocacy allows me to, since I can't wear the uniform anymore, I can still support our population in different ways, and all the different things I get to do and the people I get to interact with. Like Robert, I remember meeting you the first time, man.
Oh, wow.
This guy was just like, let me in the game, and I always love that about you, because you're like, hey, so where do you need me? How can I help? Where can I apply my skills? And that's the stuff that makes you hopeful. Right? That spirit of service, that selflessness around I can do and I should do, right? But,
wow,
seasoned folks like me have to make room for you guys. And we have to think through that strategically and say, hey, there's some new voices coming out that should be heard and should be supported. And I've got to take part in doing that.
Victor, folks like us need to not just learn, but embody seasoned folks like you. So no, it's interesting, because I think a lot about this. We were talking for a couple of minutes before we went live, and not to critique anybody that follows a different mindset, but for many that have served, they view their service, whether it's for 4 years or for 25 years. And that's one phase. And then they work on their transition. And I know that both of you have been deeply, deeply involved in ensuring that transition takes place smoothly, but they view that as their next chapter. Victor, for you, it seems to me that it wasn't a next chapter. Everything that you're doing now, that you have done, and no doubt that you will do, it's just a continuation of that story. So what leadership lessons have you taken? How did your time beginning at Fort Huachuca and continuing on at Fort Drum, and I'd love to hear some of the stories along the way, but how have you taken those lessons and applied it in your civilian life?
So for me, I think it all started at basic training at Fort Sill. Shout out to the home of the battlefield, the kings of the battlefield. Field artillery is a tough environment to come up in, but that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to be immersed in the ethos of what it takes to be a warfighter, right? And having those folks around you who understand the standard and uphold that standard at a high level was tough physically, it was tough mentally and emotionally, but it set the right tone for my career, to be honest with you, right? When people tell you all day, every day, it is not about you or what you want or what you think, right? Understand how valuable the mission is and the people around you who help you execute that mission. That's the ethos and the mindset you want to see people bring into the workforce. You want to see people bring into the academic environment. So it really kind of set that tone. And then finally getting the drum, I got to Fort Drum at the right time. We were going through the transformation, going to, the BCT model. So we were really thinking through, how does a brigade combat team come together, stay together for the life cycle, right, which was 3 years, and do nothing but train and fight together as a unit. And to see that first stage of the Army converting into that new method, that new approach, really meant so much for me from a leadership standpoint, because, I remember when General Milley actually stood up my brigade, right? So my company used to fall under another brigade, and we were pulled out, started a brigade combat team with the sapper battalion. And one of the things General Milley always said was, we are a light infantry division. And I don't care what you do here, you're a light fighter first, right? And that just set the bar. So no one cared if you were in the motor pool or comms or the DFAC, didn't matter. You're a light fighter first. And that sets a way of thinking, a level of push that's internal, that no matter what the obstacle is, you can push through this, you can achieve this, you can go through it, you can go further, right? And having sappers and having Rangers and SF guys on our base to push the standard, to have our light fighters always at the tip of the spear, to be in a light infantry unit that had an air assault school on it, right? So you were going to repel, you were going to ruck, you were going to hump, you were going to do all the tough work, right? You were going to get there under your own steam. But most importantly, you showed up as a professional, right? And that level of professionalism I was able to carry with me into opportunities in academia, then serving on the Advisory Council for Veterans Affairs, and then ultimately with the mayor. If you had said, hey, one day you'll be briefing, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the Pentagon, I would have laughed. If you'd be talking to the Deputy Undersecretary or the Undersecretary of the Navy, or hosting the Warrior Games in Chicago, and all the other slew of other things we were able to get done as a city. It was an honor for me to take that to the East Wing and to the West Wing and talk about what veterans were doing and achieving in Chicago, and discuss further how we could replicate that in other cities. And that's the amazing piece about Chicago. When people always ask me, what do you miss the most? I say it's the village. I miss the village more than I miss anything, right? Yeah, it was great to carry the responsibility and the weight of the mayor's voice and name with you into rooms as you advocate and partner and build, be accountable and hold others accountable. But it was just also amazing to know that if anyone had an issue serving a veteran, sorry, can you see me still?
Oh, yeah.
All right. I'm sorry, something popped up on the screen.
Okay.
It was vital that someone could send a text, an email, or a phone call, and we would figure out that moment, that day, how to support that veteran. And a lot of cities still need that network, that rich culture of, it doesn't matter who's got what funding, doesn't matter who works for what organization, what your title is, we'll come together and support a veteran. If someone's family needs something, so many different veterans, Leon and Nicole and Eli Williamson and Manuel and Brandon Marty, and so many people were just like, hey, like what does this person need? A bus card, no problem. We can take care of that. What is, this person's getting ready to lose their apartment, no problem. I know somebody at Feather Fist. And to see Vietnam vets working with post 9/11 vets, to see Gulf War vets working with ROTC cadets, right? And getting the junior ROTC cadets, which was also one of my favorite parts of my job. Chicago has the largest junior ROTC in the country. The largest in the country. And to see thousands of kids commit themselves to some level of excellence, to have one of the highest graduation rates in the city and in the state, really does speak to the culture, right? Those grandparents, and being able to sit with the Montford Point Marines and the Triple Nickel and just listen to history, going to Pulaski Day and learning about, like, had I not come to Chicago, I would never know who General Pulaski was, right? Think through those sorts of things, right? Chicago's that kind of place where the veterans in Chinatown will invite you out for their parade to come walk with them, right? And, opening up a homeless shelter in Humboldt Park in the name of the Boniquenaires, right? And just understanding that we are this gumbo, this melting pot of service members, whether they were in Pilsen or whether they were in, South Shore, they would come together to meet each other's needs. That piece is so difficult to quantify, right? Because people say, well, how do you track it? You track it by pressure testing, right? By saying, hey, so-and-so's car broke down and they're going to lose their job without transportation. Let's help to figure them out, right? And for people to just come together on every level and say, doesn't matter what the organizations are going to do, we're going to get it done. You can't find that everywhere, So I'm glad to see guys like Robert and so many other young veterans who are just like, we have that sense of opportunity and ownership to pick up the mantle, right? And he was talking to me about Shalom, and I kept saying, like, man, I've never heard this name before, which is weird in the veteran space in Chicago, right? In Illinois, typically somebody knows everybody. That's just how it is. So to hear a new name, I was like, okay, bet. Now I know there's a new set of legs in the fight, and somebody else is lightening the load. And Keiston Franklin and I were talking about this from Warrior Summit Coalition, and he was just like, man, it's just good to see so many new vets. They're like,
Victor, I went into this fight a little bit later. I only joined at 29 and went in on the reserve side, and as I always joke around, I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. So I'd say my identity was primarily around other stuff, on business and entrepreneurship, and I host another show around that. But for me, it's all service, and coming in. There's no way I'm just gonna put on the uniform. As they say, a weekend warrior, put it on a weekend a month. No chance in the world that would happen. So for me, it's a daily fight. It's something I'm involved in, and I'm just I'm proud to be on your team.
No, man, I appreciate it. This is there's this video of the U.S. track team going around and seeing how each one of these young ladies poured it all on the track field for their leg of the race. That's what it's about, right? This is not a sprint. This is a relay. This is a marathon. It takes, over the next 10 years, it's going to take all of us to do a little bit, right, to make it all work. So, welcome, Shalom, and I'm glad to see you out here. You say you came in at 29?
Came in at 29. I'm 31 now, and so I'm an MP.
Okay.
And, having fun. Good times, and very, very, very involved now. Of course, it's funny you mentioned when you first met Robert. It's funny, I can relate to that because Robert, you'll recall that morning that I reached out to you, and I had seen again Robert's name on a bunch of things, and I just called and, Robert, do you recall that conversation?
I can't forget it, brother. Just like I can't forget when I met Victor. It was I was excited because I felt the passion that Victor had. I felt just the same way I felt the passion that you had, Shalom. So I got excited because I'm like, I'm really connecting with someone who gets it. So
I just reached out, Victor, and I basically said, hey, you don't know me, but what can I do? What can I do? And then we started several conversations, and then it was on the second conversation I said, brother, we got to amplify this message. Let's do a podcast together. We've never met, but let's do this together. And
I told Victor, I'm like, the only thing I did right was I didn't say no.
There you go. We're on the same page, and it's exciting to hear your story, Victor. And like I said, just that continued message and continued service, which certainly has continued for sure.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too, Victor, obviously you are who you are in this space because of your selflessness, but because you have the community of service that you were kind of cultivated in, family-wise and community-wise in DC, and just over the years, I'm sure, like you said, in your service, and then coming to Chicago, man, I think the community is better because of you being here. So you miss what you helped set up. So I just want to give you your flowers, as they say, as when you can hear me talking about it. So,
Yes,
but I also want to say, if you were talking to young Robert, like real young Robert, 17-year-old Robert, not the guy you met a couple years ago, but
okay.
And I was like, man, Victor, I'm from Chicago or from the South Side. I don't know if I'm going to college, but this recruiter keeps coming up to me talking about the military. What advice would you give to young 17-year-old Robert considering military service?
Well, the first thing I tell you is whatever you do, do it 100%, right? Like your passion you can only be the only driver of your passion and your outcomes. And, it's funny because I had this conversation with my cousin's daughter. She was like, I want to go in the Air Force. I don't want to go straight to college. I said, nope, you're going to go into ROTC. And I explained to her why. And I explained to her, I said, listen, everyone before you did it the hard way. Someone's got to do it the smart way. Right? And the reality of it is that for many of us, it's going to be 1 or 2 contracts, and then you go back into the civilian world and you do something else, go to school, get a home, build a family, whatever. So when you're young, you don't think about what's next, the next 2 or 3 iterations of your life. So whenever people always say, hey, can you talk to my son, or you talk to my little brother? If I were talking to a younger Robert, I would ask you, what do you want the military to prepare you for later? Because it makes a difference, right?
Right.
And I don't think being young and being guys, we don't usually think about that. We just think about that momentarily. I'm going to go do the toughest thing I can do, prove something to myself, or prove something to others, or whatever. And you get into it, and you start realizing, like, I can't do this as a civilian when I get out, right? There's only so many Bravo jobs out there. Just like, right? So you start thinking through, this is why we have so many people in support battalions, because all of those other skill sets, soft skills as we call them often, have to be developed, but they're also transferable. So I would encourage you to think about what you're going to do for the military, what you expect the military to do for you, prepare you, make you more mature, make you a better person. In what ways? Just to think a little bit more, right? Because on the front end of it, it's always doing. We get distracted with the doing, right? Got to go to schools, got to get in shape, got to stay in shape. Like, you spend most of your time working out, doing something physical, doing something reading, going through TMs, getting in trouble, yada, yada. Especially in the Corps, because the Corps treats you like you're an infantryman all the time, no matter what your job is. And then one day you're done and you have to kind of put it back together and say, man, all right, what do I do with this stuff that I acquired? A military is also a great place to invest in yourself, right? So you invest in your service on one hand, but you're also investing in yourself, right? And I was really good. I had good NCOs that said, hey, you need to go to these schools, right? It wasn't because I was like bored and I had nothing else to do, but they were like, the more skills you put in your bag, when it's time to do something else, those skills you can leverage later on. And I just had really good value in that, right? And I always share that with young service members or people who want to serve. And I would also ask you, why the military, right? Because, you could serve as a teacher, there's a lot of stuff you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Peace Corps, whatever. Because I like for people to tell me why they want to be a part, how they're going to contribute to our community, right? And so I like and sometimes young guys and girls don't know exactly why, they just have that calling. And that's good too, right? To just say, I have a calling, something in me that says I need to serve. I love that also, because you're going to need that to get you through those tough times. You know, those sitting on the flight line waiting for a flight that never comes, only for them to tell you to stand down and go back to garrison and store your gear. You know, we've all done that hurry up and wait stuff, and it can eat at your sanity. And it's those moments you're like, man, I never should have X, Y, and Z. Right?
Right.
There's a lot of learning in the process. There's all the great learning happens in failure, right? So being able to go out and figure out what your limits are as a person, and then how to push those limits, how to go from good to great, how to go from great to phenomenal at what you do, how to embrace standards. Because unfortunately, like, you know, schools don't traditionally teach some of that stuff. And society is not pushing that. So we do need that encouragement for young people. You know, so my feedback to young Robert would be, know why you're doing what you're doing, have a great time doing it. You know, before you know it, it's going to be over. And never do something that when you look back on it, you wish you had done it correctly or better or harder, right? I went at it as hard as I could until my body said, guess what? No more of this, right? And then I had to do something else.
Right.
So I walked away.
You would have also said join the Army, not the Corps, right?
I mean, you know, obviously if I don't know what his ASVAB score was. I don't want to get into that. Robert's good friend. I don't think discourage him in any way. I don't know how many waivers they gave him. You know what I mean? We got a support group for that too. You know, so, but, you know, sometimes young people need to hear, like, you actually might be a better candidate. You probably make a better sailor than a Marine, right? And that's not a knock on you. It's that other people understand your personality better than you do sometimes, and your capacity, right? That Marine Corps life is not an easy life, right? And I go down and I talk about transition to Marines down in San Diego, and they are young and tough and ready to get at it until they're not. And then when it's time to go, it's time to go. And the one thing I always worry about with Marines, you know, is everything in the Corps is about the Corps in that moment. And when it's time to do something else, time to pivot, they don't know what that looks like, because no one really talks to you about what's next. Everything's about readiness with the command. So being able to engage our service members early before they separate gives them a leg up. And I often think about that, you know, because most folks kind of have some downtime to think about that. Man, when you know, they call them Hollywood Marines out here, but when they are out here, man, it's tough times. It's hot. You know, these dudes, it's a big base, you know. So when you go down and you just realize, like, this, you know, I'm an Army guy, so I'm always going to be faithful to what I believe in, but that ain't just no cakewalk down there. You know, everybody's not made for that. So sometimes it's, you know, people say, oh man, I want to do 20 years. And a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Until, you know, I joined the day before I turned 35. So yeah, I'm not the brightest guy every time, you know. I've made some decisions that my body isn't proud of, but I knew that it was now or never. And I couldn't come up with a reason why not to serve when I knew I needed to. So I did.
Good for you. Victor, I have to pick on that piece for a second. That's fascinating. I did not know that. When I went in at 29, I was prepared to be the old guy. I went through basic training at Fort Benning, and, you know, all the infantry HUA guys, and you know, I was actually prepared to basically be smoked out and basically just like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to handle this. But the truth is, it actually was so much easier than I ever imagined in terms of basic training. My brain was on vacation. You know, it was pretty much, for the first time in a long while, I did not have to be responsive to people. I would get I had a ton of people. I had the governor sending me letters and basic training and things like that. But I would open my letter and respond and whatever. But pretty much once I was done with that period of the day, no other real interaction, no brain power put into it. It was just do the job. And physically, I found it was so easy. There's so many kids that are in basic training right now that were 10 plus years younger than me, and I don't know if they sit and they play video games all the time, but man, I think the lesson that they need to learn is just call it resilience and perseverance. And it's fascinating. And then I'd say over time, OCS, so I commissioned as I mentioned, an MP officer. So in OCS, it was certainly, started to tease my brain a little bit more. But it was not as challenging as I thought, coming in as the old guy. There were definitely moments that I was called the dad, but that's okay. I'll be a mentor to the younglings out there.
Yeah, it's so, I think there's several factors. One, there's doctrine in 2020 that they use in basic training that they didn't use in 2003 and 2004, right? We were also in the surge, right, when I was in basic training. So the military was essentially saying, if you've got a pulse, you can do this, and you can probably rub your head and your stomach at the same time, we're going to give you a shot, right? And we put a lot of pressure on drill sergeants to go out here and to hammer whatever this product is you're getting from that family into something that can go out and move the will of the American people. Now, fitness is a huge issue in our country, huge issue. It's a national security issue. It's a readiness issue. We're just not, our leaders aren't talking about it enough. Food, nutrition, and activity. The kids don't go to gym like they used to. They also don't play outside like they used to. But you couldn't keep me in the house. The worst thing you could do to me was make me stay in the house. And I have to let other people play through the window. It was the saddest times of my entire existence. Now, today's kids, they've got, phones, and they're occupied with being stationary. And that is not a life conducive to going out here, running through obstacle courses, getting yelled at, sleep deprivation. They get to take their phones to basic and all, you can only smoke them so much and all that good stuff. So, you have to build character in other ways. And, society today is a very inward looking culture. And that's not something conducive to the military way. So you see a lot of younger people struggling in that regard. Not necessarily, the physicality is always going to be tough. And I was in good shape. I played flag football and softball and all those great things. And, certainly about 30 pounds lighter than I am today. But, I think for me, it was just the rigors of being in Oklahoma in January, February, March. Right, so I didn't know it got that cold. First time I got frostbite was in Oklahoma. I didn't get frostbite at the 10th Mountain Division. I got it in Oklahoma, right? But and nobody cared. It was that, no, you're not dead yet, Army. So get it moving. We'll figure out the rest later.
The variance in weather, those late night freezing nights, and those midday boiling hot sun. Oh my God, you don't know how to plan or prepare. And I remember those days out at the range, and like you'd go out there when it's still dark outside, and you literally, I mean, I think I probably went over a month without feeling any of my extremities, not like having any sensation in my toes or fingers, and then literally being sunburnt at the same time.
Right.
Like, really?
I mean, it's the only place I've ever been where there's snow and frost on the grass at 6 a.m. So you're out there rolling around and running and jumping and sweating and everything. You go in, put on your polypros because it's freezing out. By noon, you're burning up. So now you got to change again somehow, and then it's like, what's the uniform of the day? It's all these things, it's everything. But again, right. So what does all of that teach you? Preparation. It teaches you tenacity. It teaches you wherewithal. It teaches you some toughness. It teaches you discomfort. And discomfort is important because people need to understand that discomfort is a part of life, right? Life is not about comfort. Life is about discomfort. Learning is about discomfort. Understanding the people you train with is about discomfort, right? Understanding new cultures. You know, I'd met guys that had never actually physically touched someone Black before, right? And to have conversations with people who only understood your culture from TV was important for their growth and mine, right? Because it also helped me understand, you know, that what you see in rural Alabama or Arkansas is different than what you see in Chicago and St. Louis and so on, right? And it teaches you about the mosaic of our country. So, you know, having battle buddies who are Native American and who are Haitian and who are, you know, Mexican and Puerto Rican and Dominican, and you have this mix, you know, and you got a couple of hillbillies and you got some city guys and you got everything you need in one place to make tough times happen. But some of the best laughter I've ever had, you know, was my time in basic, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, you know, there's some nicks and cuts I would trade out of that time in Oklahoma. But you know, it's really, even today when we were at work, people always say, "Well, you know, you just don't seem frazzled." I said, "Well, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, right? It gives, like, the military gives you perspective that other people don't have. So you have to almost help them understand, like, listen, we can problem solve through this like everything else we do. None of this is the end of the world, right? There's no one shooting. There's nothing blowing up. No one's on fire. You know, I can see if you're like, hey, you were yelling, I'm black on ammo. Then we got other concerns. But in this environment, we can figure this out, right? If we put our minds to it, we listen to each other's contributions, and we come up with a good plan and a good strategy. And this is why I'm always such a huge advocate for veterans and leadership, because we understand how to demonstrate not only getting things done, but bringing everyone with us, right? Listening to those people who, some of the best ideas you'll have will come from a PFC, right? Not some lieutenant, because the lieutenant's trying to also stay alive like everybody else.
That's right.
And so you're hopeful that there's a staff sergeant somewhere that can marry up with that lieutenant to keep things balanced and learning, right? Meanwhile, PFC Jones is like, hey, sir, you know what we could do? This would be easier, safer, faster, better. And you're like, you know what, Roger, let's do that. That's this environment, as opposed to someone saying to you, I'm the executive director, you're a coordinator, I'll tell you what to think, right? So you've already crippled your team just with that mindset. And helping people understand that better, they better evaluate and better equate what Robert can bring, what Shalom can bring. Those people are helping them understand, like, you need all these contributions, right? The more diversity you have, the better solutions you can come up with, the more effective you can be as an organization, right?
Indeed. No, that's spot on, Victor, as always. And one of the things that interests me now, you know, we miss you in Chicago, brother. I was telling Shalom, I was telling Victor that I was at an event, and you know, I was meeting someone for the first time, and they were like, "Oh, you know Victor?" I'm like Victor Legroon. They're like, "Yeah, Victor Legroon." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Oh, you cool with me then?" So
That's
he was at JLL, by the way.
Okay,
Victor. So I think you know I'm talking about George.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but what I want to say, man, is now that you've transitioned to your new role as City of Hope. I say new; it's been a few years, but you're at City of Hope now in LA, and I know that I still see you, man, moving and shaking and being a leader as you were here in Chicago. So my question would be for you currently. You know, I know you're so passionate about transition, employment strategies for veterans, and all that. What does a perfect world look like for veterans in, let's say, 10 years from now?
Wow. When we have equal opportunity and equal access and equal value, right? I'm not a huge advocate of, we need special circumstances, right? We just need the opportunity. We need the access. We need, there's a huge gap between when you come out, what you think you know and what you need to know. And the process of acquiring that knowledge for us can be a challenge because we're used to certain systems where we know how to navigate those systems to gain access to information. We come out to another set of systems with individual set of rules that we're trying to figure out, how do I get into this school? How do I purchase this home? How do I get access to behavioral health that I need today? How do I get gainfully employed and not underemployed, right? And as you're fighting through all these other issues and learning in all these different places, you can get overwhelmed and it's not the optimal learning experience, right? So the new norm, the ideal situation for me would be where someone said, okay, this person is a service member. If they're applying here, I want to make sure they have this information. I want to make sure they fully understand what the role is, but also I want to make sure we can fully evaluate their experience, what they bring to the table, and at least give them an opportunity to tell their story and sell themselves. If we do that, I think that you will see where veterans serve escalate and elevate. You'll see more of us in the legislative environment. You'll see more of us influencing public policy, leading in organizations, because we've got the leadership skills. That's not the question. Will people make room for us? Will people value our service the way that they should? And I think it happens in some places sometimes. But I had a partner out here in LA and I said, listen, there's a huge difference between hiring veterans and giving veterans opportunities, right? If you're running a bank and I come into your bank and they're all cashiers and security at the bank and processing claims and right, and they're not assistant manager program for them, they're not being transitioned to leadership, understanding, and opportunity, right? Getting that cultural awareness and finance, the stuff that helps you excel, then you're not really doing the thing, right? You're checking a box, you're doing the feel good stuff, but you're not doing the long sustainable work. Because if I hire Shalom to run a division in my workplace, I know that at every level, he's going to have expectations of those leaders and he's going to communicate that to those leaders. So who better to communicate that to than other people who understand that cultural nuance, right? So when you have veterans in places, veterans are more likely to know and hire other good veterans. And that's really how we build a bench. That's how we sustain gainful employment. That's how we stabilize our community where they need it the most.
Wow.
Wow, great answer.
Victor, Robert has told me so much about your work here in the city of Chicago, and I'm just upset that I wasn't in the fight yet while you were here. Although there's no doubt that we are going to meet for sure. But what can you tell us briefly? You've talked a lot about your love for Chicago. You've talked a lot about that culture of service that you certainly have seen in Chicago, which is directly in line with our mission of this podcast. But what can you tell us, briefly from your experience working in city government in Chicago, as well as what you're doing right now at City of Hope? Just any experiences, any highlights, and perhaps any shout outs that you want to make of amazing mentors along the way.
Man, so I would start with recognizing Mayor Emanuel, because when it wasn't popular, he accepted the president's challenge to ending veterans homelessness. He was serious about the initiative. He leveraged over $1 million of the city's money to match what the federal government was giving us. His expectations are very clear. I want less veterans going into homelessness, and I want less homeless veterans, period. And for me, part of why I was able to be so successful is that he did not circumvent the things that I thought were important about veterans. So it gave me the opportunity to write policy for our city to protect and preserve our veterans' rights, to influence policy so that veterans who had businesses would have a bidding preference, so that they would have a hiring preference with law enforcement and the fire chief, right? All of that's because you have leadership in the administration that wants to see that elevate. I'm challenged with where the current administration is because I feel like for some politicians, veterans are an afterthought after they get in office. And they feel like, hey, I've got the vote. We'll get back to them when I get back to them. We'll see them on Veterans Day, no Memorial Day, and then everything's good, right? As if those are the only 2 days we have any relevance. Today here in LA, I serve in Mayor Garcetti's suicide prevention task force. And, shout out to him for so many initiatives he's pushed out in a city like LA that has so many veterans. The state of California has 1.9 million veterans. That's more veterans in this state than some states have people, right? And understanding how huge that challenge is to serve that population has not made him push back as a service member, right? So I'm hopeful and I'm thankful that there are people in places in Chicago to move the mission forward, even when we're not able to rely on our legislators and our leaders. Because, leadership is more than just title. It's action, right? It's attitude. I feel optimistic that we have a lot of veterans doing what you guys are doing, pushing our voice out, amplifying the message, helping people understand why this community is so vital to our nation. And that's going to be impactful over the long term. You guys are going to continue to lead no matter where you go and what you do. And I'm faithful that you'll continue to make space for other veterans' voices. Our female veteran population, our LGBTQ veterans, our minority veterans, those veterans who have served in honor of earning their citizenship, that, some of those guys love this country more than anybody I've ever met. And, that's just an actual fact, right? One of my best friends, my battle buddy from Haiti, this guy just talked his love for this country. He and his brother just really inspired me. And we ended up losing this brother in Iraq, but it taught me to just enjoy every single day of what we have. So I'm optimistic, and I'm appreciative that some administrations around the country are really taking hold of how they can better serve their veterans. But we still have a lot of work to do, right? We still got to get the state of Illinois to listen better to the voice of the veteran and understand how to support what veterans need on the ground level, but also listen to those leaders in those organizations that are saying, hey, like we got to do something to help veterans with home ownership. We got to stabilize these folks that are unstably housed. We got to do better with partnering with Veteran Drug Court, right? There's a number of other things that we're still making gains on that we got to double down on. So I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic because of you guys and people like you, but we still got some work to do.
Wow, absolutely, Victor. And, can't thank you enough, man, for continuing to push the ball and move the needle and inspire. I think, enough can't be said for our leaders who can truly inspire the ones that come behind them. And that's going to be part of your legacy, I believe, that you have inspired the next movement, and continue to. But, with all of your success now with City of Hope, Chicago, the imprint you left here, and, in your military service back home in DC, I got to ask you, man, like you've done a lot of great things. It's kind of hard to say, but what would be next for Victor?
Man, what would be next? That's a hard question to answer right now. There's some opportunities in DC, obviously for me. There's some stuff people are talking to me about. For the right opportunity, I'd come back to Chicago because I've just got such a love for the city and for the community. And that network really does allow doing that work to be easier. But, right now, man, I can't say what's next. My biggest goal was to come through this COVID year with some additional skills, better perspective, having a better understanding of what the landscape looks like, where I can be most influential and most supportive and most helpful. So I wanted to take time this year to learn. Leadership LA has really been a great program for me, just because as a leader, it's always good to listen to other leaders, to learn best practices, to understand how we need to morph and change to meet this post-COVID environment. You know, and I was fortunate. I was at the McChrystal Group's headquarters in Virginia, listening to General McChrystal, and he was saying, you know, this is a pivotal time for our veterans because no one understands change better than the population, who every single day works within change. The day you start with and the day you end with in the military is never the same.
Right.
We always push through. We always achieve. That punch list gets done no matter what. And, you know, he's right. We've got all these great leaders that we need to figure out the right ways to leverage that talent to take our country forward. Because I think people are ready for that. So I don't know what's next for me, man. I wish I had a solid answer for you. I'm not trying to be evasive, but right now I can say it's either going to be in LA, Chicago, or DC. Is that fair enough?
No, that's exciting, man. Right. I mean, exciting for us if we get to, you know, rub shoulders again in Chicago. And then, you know, just for the veteran population and the United States of America, I think, you know, having a Victor Lagroon influence us moving forward is important. So,
yeah. I thank you, man, because it's one of the things I'm most proud of is I get to see so many veterans that I consider to be better than me, right? Mm. Guys like you, like George, Ross, like Emmanuel Johnson, just like Brandon, Marty, they're guys that I consider, like if you're in your 30s, you're much younger than me, right? So I always look at you guys like the next 20 years is going to have all of these leaders who are just tooled and ready to provide some leadership, right? In times in which we need it the most. And, you know, Shalom, you too, because at some point, dude, you're going to realize, like, now that you're doing this work in the space, different people are just going to start pulling on you. Hey, can you come to this? Hey, can you speak at that? Hey, can you do this thing? Hey, can you talk to my buddy? Hey, my son has a question. And that's when you start realizing two things, right? The volume of the need for workers, but also how many skills you actually have in you. Like sometimes you don't understand the inventory that you have inside, how many people you talk to, how much information you have. And it's that sharing of information that helps our veterans not struggle. So, you know, I'm really optimistic, man. And a lot of people aren't in our country right now, right? And I was talking to one of my buddies in Australia who heads their Student Veterans Association. He was just like, man, like we look to America to lead us through tough times. And it looks like we have to lead you guys through tough times. And that's hard to hear, right? Because people do need us and they need our voices and they need this platform. So, you know, hopefully, Robert, man, you know, I would love to come back to Chicago and rub shoulders with you and push you out there like, yep, Robert knows. Know who you should call? I got the guy for you.
Yeah. You know, I met Victor. I don't know if you remember this, but we actually we were in the same. We met on the same day that I met Senator Dick Durbin. So like physically, you and I met for the first time. I knew of you, but yeah, on that same day at a symposium, it was an exciting day for me all the way around. And so it would be a pleasure, man, to have your leadership back here in you know, in the Windy City. So
yes, sir. Durbin's another great one, man. Every time I see him, you know, he's, hey, how are our veterans doing? You know, what do they need? What are we not getting? What are we not seeing? You know, just being able to talk to someone about burn pit registry and all these other things that are concerns of ours. You know, that's our Agent Orange for our generation. And if we're not careful, we're going to be fighting that same fight 20 years from now. So, yeah, man, it has been a while since we first met, hasn't it?
It has, man. That's what, like 3 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, like I'd say almost 4 years ago. You know,
Yeah.
you were young, like just what do you need? I thought, oh man, I got it. I was like,
right.
Hey, have at it.
Man. Always admired your service, man. So just hats off. And once again, man, thank you for sharing with our audience, whether it was if they're listening or if they're looking at us right now. I'm going to tell our audience you're looking at someone who, and Victor, who continues to aspire, service and veterans in particular, no matter where he's at, not just here in Chicago or in LA or in DC, but just a standard that he set. So thank you, Victor, for everything you've done. Thank you for everything you're endeavoring, and we're excited to see what you do next. That's good. That's great, man.
Me too, man. I'm excited to see what I do next as well. Hopefully, I'll take it easy on myself. But yeah, I'm excited about, I got the chance to look at some of your catalog of other interviews.
Yeah.
And I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing, man. Like, I would have, first of all, I don't know how you make time for something like this, but at the same time, you guys are actually like a really good 1 and 2, like Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder kind of combination. You're so different, but you also complement the discussion so well together that, I'm glad to see, that you've got this thing going on, and keep it going, man. Just keep pushing the voice, and keep being advocates like you are. So I appreciate you guys so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Such a pleasure. And I'll echo Robert. I can't wait to have you back in Chicago. You haven't committed to coming back to Chicago.
Keep him in line, man. Don't let the Marine Corps stuff get you.
Oh, no. I have a.
Too late, Victor. I got him, man.
I forgot, Robert, when we saw each other at the interview with Secretary of State White, I did have a pack of Crayola in my car, and I forgot to pull it out. My bad.
Well, you probably saw me, and you were on your way in, and you saw me coming in, and then you took a U-turn and went back to the car.
Good times.
Good times, brother.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you.
Going to Victor, by the way.
Yes, sir, man. Listen, thanks for having me, man. Look forward to coming and meeting with you guys again.
Absolutely. No, we'll have you back on, and can't wait to continue to follow and do good stuff. So thank you for joining us. And, definitely for all of our viewers, listeners, make sure you subscribe because, Robert and I talk about this all the time. There's something to learn from everybody, and so much that we've learned today from Victor Legroon, and in our upcoming conversations, there's so many great lessons learned. And by the way, Robert, I'm going to give you a shout out. On Friday night, you did an awesome interview on Alatra TV, talked about your service. So to all of our viewers and listeners, make sure you look out for that great conversation. Good job, brother.
Thank you, brother. And Victor, at the end of that interview, they asked me who do I think they should talk to next, and I dropped your name, brother. So, so you're probably going to be getting an invitation real soon.
Okay.
Keep your eyes open for that, man.
Yes, sir. The gift that keeps giving.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you all. We all serve, and we all serve will continue next week. But Victor, Robert, we all serve, my brothers. Thank you.
We all serve.
Be good. Stay safe.